This is Scott with EffectiveDog.com, your nomadic dog trainer. I want to give thanks to the Hickory Apache and Southern Utes, the beautiful land that I get to call home for a little bit and be able to present my dopamine thing. But I want to remind people to look up murdered missing Indigenous women, educate ourselves so we can help. Did you feel a certain way? Did you get a little bit of a rise of frustration and anger? We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about dopamine spikes and what they mean with baseline. So, here we're going to talk about dopamine. So in red, I've got dopamine equals motivation. Oh, I forgot something. Black will have baseline, also homeostasis and recovery. And in blue, I'll have these little marks for dopamine spikes. So there's this thing called dopamine depletion that we're not too familiar with in the dog training world because we think dogs should be in a specific way. They should be constantly motivated, routine. My black line here is a day 1, a day 2, and a day 3. My red is dopamine, motivation, not reward, but motivation. Every time we see a spike, that's a dopamine peak. That's where it spikes. These peaks is where the dopamine needs to drop. And we're going to see what happens after 3 days. You can look up Dopamine Nation. I'm going to try and Dr. Annie Lembke, Dopamine Nation. So let's talk about day 1. To the left of the screen, you start up, you wake up, you your body's telling you got to go potty, so you're not at baseline anymore. And then your dog tells you, I need to go potty. We have a spike. While you're getting ready to go outside, we start to have an increase in dopamine, so the red line rises. And the dog gets to go pee, find the perfect spot and starts to pee, right? Dopamine decreases. Oh, it feels so good. I can just relax a little bit. And then we go run around. The dog starts kicking, starts doing natural behaviors. And then we start to walk back. Okay, we have a spike. We start walking a little bit. We got to stay motivated. Then they get to go home and they get to go rest. Maybe even eat breakfast. They go rest, it slowly fluctuates. While they rest, they go below a baseline to come back up. Then we take them out again, right? We play ball. Or we just kind of like take them out. We hang out with them. So it can spike and not be as high as the other side. And it drops down. We leave for the day. Throughout the day, they get up and they walk around. They do their own little things so the dopamine can stay near baseline. We get home, they get excited to see us. They get a little bit of comfort, so they get to drop in baseline. Then we get to take them outside. They get to go walk. They get to go smell. We get to play. And let's just imagine fetch. We're going to have a constant, they play fetch. You're going to have a constant increase and then a spike. Then a decrease, and they're going to keep playing fetch, increase, decrease. And then finally we start walking home, and oh my God, I'm so glad to get home. They rest. Dinner, play, rest. Okay, well, that's great. It's fairly consistent on day 1. Well, day 2, we go through the same routine. I try to make it as close, but shorter. But this time, the baseline drops. Trying to get the same type of activities, but it's not going to be as high as yesterday. We're going to have deeper valleys. These spikes are going to drop down sooner. And it's not really going to reach baseline until they go to sleep. But the baseline's trying to stay down here. So technically what I should have done is gone even closer down here and then had bigger spikes, but they're not fully going to reach. My point was they're not really going to reach here. Day 3, the baseline drops. While we're trying to have higher activities, trying to mimic the same thing as day 1 and day 2, the baseline's a lot lower, which means they're going to need more rest. We try to repeat the same type stuff, it's not going to work. They're going to have bigger valleys. The dopamine's not going to reach as high. But you're also going to increase a chance for frustration because they don't have a real chance to rest. We'll have bigger spikes and bigger valleys, bigger highs and lows. The highs are not good because every time you have a spike or a peak, because a peak means the next behavior is going to happen, they need to get back down here. Giving them rest for a few days is going to actually help it go back to where you can have a day 1. Because doing the same thing in the routine, especially in high activities, or you're trying to keep your dog motivated or constantly have fun, you increase a chance of what they call dopamine depletion, where dopamine has to be used constantly if we're trying to mimic the same type of spikes. And that's what we look for with dog training, especially trainers. Oh, look, they love to play ball. Oh, look, they're doing this, they're happy. Let's keep repeating it. It's not supposed to be repeated. Otherwise, it's not as rewarding, and as you see on day 3. But if we kept trying to repeat day 1 on day 4 and day 5 and day 6, dopamine, the brain's going to start going to get dopamine out of its own little vegetables, out of its reserves. So we're creating what they call a pain-pleasure balance. While they're trying to get up to pleasure, and they're trying to come down to recover. But do they ever really get to go to the baseline? And some baselines, if they know you're going to be doing this stuff for 3 days, because after day 4 or 5 and they had to use the peak, now they start to realize I need to have a higher baseline, aka stamina. I'll probably redo this video. But see how we can have the dopamine spikes, but they don't have to be so high and then the big valleys. If we can keep the spikes fairly consistent, we can have drops. We need the drops. The dogs need the drops. We call those low dopamine days. Days of depression, low motivation. We don't have to make them have low motivation, but we start to realize how much activity we are doing on these dogs. We're going to start to realize how many low days they start to have and how much we might have caused that. But that's okay. The beautiful about some of these low days is you can go rest with your dog when you actually can. Ask them, hang out with them, because then you're going to increase in dodges, opioids, and all kinds of other little things. But this is just basically about dopamine spikes, because dopamine is motivation. But there's a baseline to help with homeostasis and recovery. This is Scott with EffectiveDog.com. Think about this type of stuff. And this is why we always talk about dopamine, how it is pleasurable. It's not pleasurable, but it's rewarding. It's motivation. Food, water, hunger, thirst, sex. That's what it's needed for. So I'm going to go, I can see Blue chewing on a stick, which means he's trying to increase and dodge his opioids because he thought he was going to get on camera with me. So I don't want to disappoint him. Can I cuddle? That's Bell Stick. Yeah. Thank you. So we don't have to stray too far from the dopamine increase from baseline. Have a great day.